Hello everybody and welcome back to the Fantasy Football Fix YouTube channel. My name's FPL Phillips. Game week 12 is not too far away and it's time to take you through another one of my team reveals. Game week 11 was an absolute shocker, as I'm sure every one of you watching this video is probably aware of by now. But I actually had a relatively decent week in the grand scheme of things. We'll get into how my rank has been affected in just a moment. But before we do get into it, just a moment that if you did have a bad week in FPL last week, it was probably a good week to have a bad week. So if you did have a shocking score, which I've seen some as low as just over 10 points, then really don't be too disheartened is my advice. I think a lot of good teams did have bad outcomes in this game week. So remember, it's just a game. Take it. It's meant to be fun, so take it with a bit of pinch of salt. But yeah, let's get all that being said. Let's get into having a look at an in-depth YouTube video as to how this game is going for me with this game week. What my transfer plans are, with 2 free transfers having rolled in the end of it, or game week 11. And let's have a look at my team selection, as well as the captaincy discussion and the top 10 predicted point scorers ahead of game week 12. So, with the rank change, my rank is now inside the top 1 million and rather comfortably up to inside the top 700k. So, I'm very happy with how I did in the grand scheme of things. I actually had Gabore come off my bench for 8 points, who was the hero of my game week due to the fact that Marcus Rashford was it, and then also he came off the bench for Gabore. So I was really happy with that. Got a lot of jammy luck, and I think that's where a lot of people's points came from. There were a few players like, was it Bruno, other players like that in some teams who did do well, but I think a lot of good options underperformed in game week 11 to say the very least. I also had Johnston in goal, this man who is going to be staying within between my sticks for game week 12. Everton at home for a nice fixture for Crystal Palace, a goalkeeper who I think people are more looking to transfer in, so he's definitely not going to be leaving my team anytime soon. If anything, I'm looking to add another Palace defender, and to be honest, I kind of regret a little bit not making the move for a Palace defender like Gueye or maybe even Mitchell, who I did consider in game week 11. The double up was maybe just putting me off, but I am still looking at bringing in a Crystal Palace defensive asset to add alongside Johnston in my side. But he's definitely going to be staying in my team for now. I mean, Turner's down there on the bench, but with him being benched in the last outing, I'm not feeling confident with him as my backup keeper now, maybe even on a bench boost. Not too sure what the circumstances were surrounding him being left out, but of course, not going to really use a transfer there anyway. I'll just wait until I use my wildcard, which, as a reminder, I do still have in the bank. In terms of the back line, it's Trippier, Tsimikas and Matty Cash, who hopefully is going to be back in time for game week 12. There have been some comments his injury doesn't seem too serious, so I'm hoping he can be back as Aston Villa take on Fulham at home. Hoping Villa can return to some home form where they have looked better than on the road and where Cash has shone in previous game weeks. It's just the last few ones where he's not been quite performing to the levels that I was expecting of him when I did bring him in for that -4 hit a couple of game weeks ago. We've then got Trippier and Tsimikas, who also has been a bit of a letdown, really, since I brought him in. He was actually benched in the last game week, which was disappointing. Some kind of speculation as to why it was that Gomez was preferred to him at left back, but also some speculation that the same thing could happen in game week 12. Of course, I'm not really going to look into that too much. He's been my transfer in. He's not going to be my transfer out. There are other defenders who are definitely going to be leaving my team, which we'll get onto in a moment before the likes of him. But yeah, not an ideal thing to say the least. But Trippier will be staying in my side. Bournemouth away isn't the easiest fixture in the world for Newcastle, but they've looked pretty good. They have unfortunately got a lot of injuries now, but that has opened the door for potential going for Lewis Hall or maybe even Livramento as an option, who I think are both priced at 4.3 million. So they're definitely two that I've added into my watch list alongside those kind of Crystal Palace assets. So deciding on which double up I would maybe want to go for is something that is on the agenda this week. What's not on the agenda, however, are some of my midfielders being replaced, but some of them definitely are. So Mbeumo, Son, and Maddison, and Saka, ideally, I'd like to keep probably all 4 of them around for another week, maybe. Mbeumo would be the one, if I had to pick, that would be on the chopping block, just because of the fixtures aren't looking too great for Brentford. But really, with him having penalties, with him being that kind of talismanic player at Brentford, he's one who is less on the chopping block for me. He's performed against big teams before. I think Liverpool could easily ship a goal to Brentford, and I'd back him to have a decent chance of being involved in it if that does go down. Whereas the man on the opposite side of the midfield that you can see on your screen on the right-hand side, I have less than no faith in. I've got no faith left in Marcus Rashford, even for Luton at home. And that is a thing that is something that I have to say with a lot of confidence, because Luton at home for any player does seem like a great fixture. But Marcus Rashford is still on my chopping block. I just think he's not going to be in Ten Hag's good books anymore. I think he will, for what it's worth, more than likely come back in to the side for the Luton game. But I still don't really want him in my side much longer. It is just whether or not I do give him that one more week, which I seem to be saying a lot at the moment. And to be saying to myself that I'm going to sell him ahead of Luton at home, I don't even feel confident saying that out loud to you guys, to be honest. So Luton at home, I probably am going to keep Marcus Rashford around for one more week if he is fit. And that's the unfortunate thing with him as an asset, is that his fixtures just do look really good on paper, and I do have other issues to address in my team and other upgrades that I can make. And when I can't afford the budget to stretch up to someone like a Salah from Rashford right now without making significant downgrades elsewhere, which for all intents and purposes I could do, maybe sacrificing Trippier and one other midfielder to upgrade Rashford. At the moment, maybe I could leave that one more game week, and to be honest, that is something that I'm considering right now, is just maybe even using one free transfer, rolling the second over, and still in that option to take kind of a mini wildcard next game week where I make 3 transfers, 2 of which being free ones, to still upgrade Rashford to Salah whilst downgrading elsewhere. But I would like to hang on to Trippier. I would like to hang on to some of my other midfield options who I may have to lose, so it's going to be a bit of a tough call. Up front is where there isn't too much of a tough decision to be made. I've got Haaland and Alvarez still in my team. I am going to hang on to Erling Haaland. He's back playing in the Champions League, so looks like he's obviously fit and ready to go for the weekend. Alvarez as well is still someone I like to hold on to. Ollie Watkins hasn't been performing as well in the last 2 game weeks. For what it's worth, I think the Fulham game at home is one where he could potentially show us why he is still a great asset, and of course hold on to him if he's in your team. He is that bit more expensive than Alvarez, so again, it's an issue where funds are more required in this side, where I have got them held up in players like Son, Saka and Rashford that would need to be freed up, and the likes of Trippier as well in defence, of course, not helping, and what are kind of taking me away from the template a little bit at the moment by not having Salah in my side. And then finally, down there on the bench, we've got Botman, who is going to be my number 1 priority to sell this week. We've got Kabore, who, to be honest, with his performance in Game Week 11, grabbing me 8 points, I'm somewhat thinking in my head, maybe I should be loyal to him now. And then Mubama as well, who, to be honest, is just dead forward at the moment and isn't going to go anywhere unless I take some rogue move, downgrade Rashford to someone like a Palmer, and then maybe use the funds to upgrade to Mubama and switch to a kind of 3-4-3, 3-5-2 formation that benches 1 forward or 1 midfielder every week. So I could do something like that, maybe even bench Mboma for this game week, for example. And I have been looking at that as a possibility. The funds are very tight at the moment, so it might involve making early switches. But yeah, that isn't something that I've ruled out entirely, and I could, in theory, upgrade Mubama by downgrading Rashford to a cheap midfielder. But the main priority transfer this week is going to be Botman out. I am looking at Hall. I am looking at Livramento as mentioned. However, at the moment, it's just a little bit uncertain who's going to be playing where. If I had to put money on it, and from what I'm seeing, looks like Lewis Hall will be the favourite to start in that left-back role. Livramento playing off the right wing in the Champions League as well. But we know that Livramento has been seen deployed at left-back. There's a possibility that Livramento could come in right-back and Trippier could move over to left-back at times. So there is uncertainty in the air at the moment, which is something swaying me perhaps to maybe give it another week. For example, bring in someone like a Gahey even this week and start him maybe even over Mboma and switch to a 4-4-2, and then still have a little bit of money left in the bank to maybe upgrade Kabore to Hall or Livramento next game week, and have a pretty nice back 5 that set me up for the next couple of game weeks following. So I could end up with a very nice looking defence. It's just whether I want to dedicate 2 free transfers, 2 defenders. The way the game is at the moment and the scope of it, maybe that's not the most sensible decision, but I think there could be some good upside with those defenders. One thing that I have got to decide on this week is the Captaincy, and I'm not going to get away with that one. What I should say there is one thing I should need to decide on this week is the captain's armband, and some of you guys may have some of the options on screen as well. Well, namely Mohamed Salah. If you've got him in your team, you need to decide between him, Haaland, Saka, and Son. Well, if you've got all 4, then I don't know how you've managed that. But yeah, a lot of us are deciding between these 4 captaincy options. The Fantasy Football Fix algorithm has Saka as the highest predicted points total this week. Burnley at home for him, as of course the kindest fixture, going by the FPL fixture difficulty ticker if that's what you take into account. But if you look at the defensive data and expected goals conceded specifically, it's Wolves who have the poorest defensive performance, 1.85 XGC for them compared to Burnley's 1.80. Then Brentford, and then Chelsea being the strongest defence, 1.16 for them. In terms of teams, we already saw last week and weeks prior that Liverpool had the best attacking data in the league at the moment. Man City are quite a decent distance behind actually, and then Arsenal and Spurs not too far behind them but tied on 1.83 XG per 90 apiece. And then finally, individuals, Mohamed Salah still looking like the best individual asset at the moment. Erling Haaland in second, then Son, and then Saka. So, to be honest, right now, if you have Salah, I'd probably have the captain's armband on him. Personally, I've got it on Haaland over Saka. I'm not considering Son too much. Maybe I should be considering him more. But with Spurs, all the injuries, everything like that, suspensions they're now going to have after that really hectic game against Chelsea, it's just enough to put me off, really, and go for someone like a Haaland or a Saka over him. But I've been burnt by Saka, going with him over Haaland last week. Maybe it's time to switch back to the old reliable Norwegian. But yeah, that's my 2 cents on that right now. Let me know who your captain is for this game week down below in the comments if you fancy. And then finally, let's take a look at the top 10 predicted point scorers for this game week. The algorithm has Saka at first, Salah in second, then it's Matoma, who's tied with Martinelli on 5.6 apiece. So maybe we should be throwing them into the captaincy discussion, and maybe you own either of them and could be considering going for that kind of more rogue option. We've then got Son on 5.5, Wilson on 5.4, White on 5.3, then Bruno Fernandes also on that points total. Haaland is behind all of those guys on 5.2. We don't often see him this low down in the top 10 predicted point scorers. And finally, it's Evan Ferguson on 5.1. So a very different looking top 10 for this week. Let me know how many of those guys you own down below in the comments. But with regards to transferring any of them in, I'm not really looking too strongly or too closely at any of these assets in particular. I would like Matoma maybe in my midfield. The Brighton fixtures don't look too shabby, and of course he is a great option in their game. However, I am just more leaning towards one of those other options. I'm trying to have a bit more fun this year, so I am very, very more, every time I mention it, I'm more tempted, or think about it, I am more tempted to do the Rashford downgrade to a cheaper midfielder. Palmer, if I can afford it, with Mubama up to Watkins maybe, could be an example of that. But it's most likely going to be that, or just using the one free transfer on Botman over to another defender, and then having 2 free transfers once again in Game Week 13 to reassess things. And as I kind of alluded to earlier, maybe even using a kind of mini wildcard with the 2 frees and a -4, maybe even a -8, to kind of rearrange, reshuffle things, and maybe bring in some players like Mo Salah and sort out some other things that I'm sure I'll have issues with my team come next game week. So yeah, that's going to wrap up Eddie's team reveal for this game week. Let me know your guys' questions down below if you've got any FPL related queries. But other than that, I wish you a very happy rest of your day. Thanks for tuning in. Leave a thumbs up if you did enjoy. Make sure to check out the links below down in the description if you fancy checking out any of the fantasy football fix tools for yourself, including the Assistant Manager tool, which I use every week for these videos. And yeah, thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.